Great. Thank you, Terry. I'm really happy to be here presenting about mental health. With the last couple of years, we've seen a great increase in people reaching out for support, and we're seeing the impact of a lot of social issues and other things that are impacting people's mental health. And I will just give a little note here that you might see my cat who likes to make an appearance every now and then. Usually he just crosses and crosses back, and then he'll leave us alone. But he's a curious cat. So what we're going to talk about today is I would like to let you know about mental illness, define it for you, really kind of talk about depression, anxiety, and seasonal affect disorder. Those tend to be the issues we see most in the workplace, and also talk about how mental health impacts our jobs and how we do our jobs and our professional development, and then give you a little bit of information about some resources that we have at UK for your own use. And as Terry said, if you have a question, just raise your hand and he'll let me know or put it in the chat box. So I'm going to do my best. I sometimes switch slides around after I've turned them in, but we'll see what happens. So I did switch. So mental health, according to the Center for Disease Control, mental health includes emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It also, and those impact our physical well-being. So mental health really is a part of how we act, how we think, what we say, what we do. It determines how we handle stressful situations, new situations, changing situations, and depending on how we are doing our own self-care, it can impact how we respond to those different situations. And mental health isn't just a, one time in your life. It's something that we watch throughout people's life and through their development. And I will also say that we see people, who experience maybe a mental health issue that is not chronic. We have some people who have chronic mental health issues based on brain chemistry, based on family history. So there can be a variety of reasons that we see people struggling at different times. Most recently, I think what we've seen is definitely the impact of the pandemic. That has changed drastically how we do our work, how we interact with each other, how we interact with our families. But also during the same time, there has been racial trauma. There's been, where I grew up, there was a huge wildfire. And so that impacts things. So we're seeing a lot of different events impacting how we're doing. And, I don't know about the rest of you, but I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, my boss said, you're going to go home and then work from home, and we'll see you back here in a couple of weeks. And, I know a couple of people in China, and I'd been talking to them, and I thought, not sure that's accurate, but we'll go with it. And then it just went on and it went on. And I think for many people, that was one of the difficult things, was that there was no end in sight. And we didn't know how to handle this situation that we'd never dealt with before. And so we like to have a little bit of control, most of us. And there wasn't a lot that we could control. So it was interesting. There was these two individuals did a mental health research in the workplace about mental health in the workplace. And they did that in October of 2019. And, they said that they did that, but then a lot of things happened. There was the murder of George Floyd and other Black Americans. There was increased violence against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. There's political unrest, environmental unrest, and all of these happening very quickly, right in a row. Before you could process one, there was another. And so they found that some of their information that they had was impacted by these changes. So when they looked again at the research in 2021, they found one good thing that has come about as a result of all of that is that there is an increased awareness about mental health in the workplace. And that makes me so happy I can't even explain it to you guys, because mental health is often one of those things we don't talk about. Yet 50% of Americans will experience a mental health issue at least once in their lifetime. So that's a lot of people who go to work and aren't always able to talk about how their issues are impacting their job. But what these researchers found was that millennials and Gen Zers were most impacted by this recent last couple of years, the events of the last couple of years. We also saw that LGBTQ plus and Black Latinx were also more likely to experience mental health symptoms. And, I think one thing that we found during the pandemic was a really great divide between healthcare availability to different facets, different parts of our population. We know that especially the underrepresented groups have less access to medical help, which also includes mental health. So we see them disproportionately struggling, but these groups are often less likely to enter or ask for help. So what we've learned from all that, and is that, the workplace does impact our mental health too. I mean, what we're seeing now with our frontline workers is a lack of workers. And so they're working a lot more. They are short-staffed, and so they don't really get a break. Work can be emotionally draining. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's overwhelming. Sometimes there's too much. We also see that what we learned during remote work was that we had to find a better way to communicate with one another, because a lot of people started feeling really cut off, really isolated, disconnected, I guess is the word. And I think we found out how much we rely in some ways on our coworkers' support. And for some people, work is where they find support. Work is where they see people more so than any other place in their life. It's where we spend the majority of the time. So all of that played into place. And then, and during that time, we started in the work life program, we started seeing an increase in people requesting to use their 5 free visits. We had 4 therapists. One of our therapists is no longer with us. And not only were we falling behind and at a time when people really needed help, what we were finding is that we're telling them, we'll see you in 6 weeks, and then they come in for their appointment and then they have to wait another 6 weeks. And that's what I say when I think now we are more aware of how many people really do need support. And I think, that has started a new conversation about the services that we offer. And it's not just us that are backlogged. It's pretty much all throughout Lexington and surrounding counties, and actually throughout the country. So when we were told we have to return to work for a lot of people, anxiety, depression, boy, it really shot up, because I think for some people, like I'm more of an introvert. I don't mind being home by myself, but it got to me after a while. I wanted to be around more people. There are some people who, one of my coworkers is an extrovert and about lost her mind. She couldn't stand it. And so it was interesting because when I would talk to people who were single, they're like, boy, I wish I had a family. I wish I just had somebody to come home to. And I talked to people that had families and they're like, they are driving me nuts. I need a break from my family. So, there were pluses and minuses to any group that you were a part of. But going back to the office was really interesting because I started talking to people and they said, this is totally anecdotal. I don't have research, but a lot of the men found, and a lot of men and women who commuted found that without the commute, they had more time at home, which meant more time with their children or more time to do the things they enjoyed doing. And they found that in some ways, it was better for their mental health. I remember one guy just saying, I've loved having the time to pick up my son from school. I've loved being able to take him to soccer practice. And now that I have to come back to the office, I'm not going to be able to do that anymore. So it's created some anger, a little resentment, a little anxiety that we found something that worked. And then we switch back. And I have a lot of people saying, I did my job at home, did it well. I didn't need to be in the office. So now we have that issue of some increased anxiety that they have to go back to a place when they were doing fine at home. That's just, some of the things that were brought on because of the pandemic, the racial trauma, the environment and things. We have a good-sized group of Asian American Pacific Islanders, and they were very scared for their families. So that increased their anxiety. I mean, we heard about increased attacks on them since that's where it was identified that the virus started. So it's impacted different races and different cultures in different ways. And that's been an interesting factor. Let's see. That's fun. Okay, so I apologize for this screen full of description, but I was aware that this was going to be put online, so I kind of wanted to put that in there in case somebody was looking at it. But the two biggest mental health issues we see in people in the workforce are depression and anxiety, with anxiety actually being the top difficulty of people. I think what we know that with depression, we think of the person who's crying a lot, who never smiles, who is mopey or, isolated and things like that. But what we see in the workplace that might give us an idea that someone is suffering or experiencing depression is that they might not be working as hard, or their productivity might decrease. They might have more absences where before they were there all the time. But, with depression, depression also has physical effects, and that can impact people's ability to get out of bed in the morning or to function throughout the day. Sometimes when people are depressed, they might start using more substances. We did see during this past couple of years an increase in the use of people using alcohol and other drugs, especially marijuana. Because that's a quick fix. Unfortunately, they're both depressants, so using those can just add to the problem. We maybe see the coworker who's coming in and they're tired all the time. You might even catch them kind of falling asleep at their desk. Maybe they used to talk about some club they were a part of or a big interest, and suddenly they're like, I just haven't been going to that, or I've just lost interest in it, that kind of thing. You might notice that they gain or lose weight. I think everybody wants to kind of be the ones that lose weight, but that's what we typically think of when we think about people experiencing depression. But there's also people who will eat more, and oftentimes it will be that comfort food, carbohydrates. So you might notice a weight gain. And part of what happens when we don't sleep is that it's harder to get up in the morning. So we might be tardy. We might be late to work more often. Without an explanation. The thing I think that I always look for most, though, is that irritability. The coworker that used to kind of be very friendly is suddenly snapping at you, or has little patience. They seem to get angry really easily where things didn't bother them as much before. And then the simple things like, well, not simple for everybody, but concentrating, being able to focus. Maybe at staff meetings, they're looking off and you're thinking, where are they? What's happened to them? So we start to see all these changes. And one of the reasons I like to teach QPR, which is question, persuade, and refer, it's a suicide prevention program, is that sometimes people will talk about suicide. And they might not come directly out and say, I want to kill myself. There's different ways they say it. And I love the QPR program because it offers the average person what to look for, how to help somebody. Because I think one of the reasons that we struggle to talk about mental health is that it's kind of scary because we don't always know how to help someone. We don't always know how to support someone. So we avoid talking about it. And the other part of, if you're looking at somebody, your coworker, or even yourself, is to what was the baseline? How, if you've always had a coworker who kind of came in, clothes weren't ironed, maybe they wore the same pants for 3 days, and they continue to do that, it might not be a sign. I mean, that might just be their style. So you want to know the baseline of these individuals before you assume they're depressed. And for yourself, and I think sometimes these things can happen slowly, but if you start hearing people that you love or care about expressing concern to you, take that seriously. Ask them what they're seeing, because sometimes depression can kind of sneak up on us and we don't really get that we're starting to become depressed. We might just think, oh, I'm just overly tired, or things like that. So it's good to know what some of these symptoms are. So some symptoms, again, like I said, there's a lot of things that we feel anxious about. Like, when I was first hired in this position, the people interviewing me said, well, how do you feel about presentations? And I said, well, I hate them. I would sweat, I would get nervous. I thought, I cannot do this, and over time, having done a lot of them now, I'm much more at ease with it, but I still get nervous. And that's kind of normal for a lot of people when you give a speech to feel anxious. You might feel anxious if you have a job interview, or you're going on a first date, or you're meeting a new doctor, or you're going to the doctor because you don't feel good. Those are things that it's just anxiousness. Oftentimes going away after the event you're anxious about has stopped. But when someone is experiencing anxiety disorder, it is the feelings they have are almost crippling. I mean, they are extreme feelings. So it's that nervousness about going to the doctor, the presentation times a million. I mean, they almost feel paralyzed at times. And it's a persistent feeling. It stays with them no matter what's going on. And there are different kinds of anxiety. There's, social anxiety of people who don't like to be out socializing. There's separation anxiety, where people don't like to be away from certain people. So there's different kinds, but the mark of an anxiety disorder is that it interferes with our functioning, or it causes marked distress. So if you start experiencing anxiety disorder, it might be almost impossible to get out the door and go to work. So we're going to see increased absences. You worry about everything, and it's not just a passing worry, it's a rumination where you go over and over and over. And, one thing we saw that I have seen in a lot of medical staff, especially nurses, is they will start to get very anxious about germs. And we saw this increase with COVID, obviously. And There's also the physical complaints that come with anxiety, or the physical symptoms: sweating, your stomach gets upset, maybe you start shaking a little bit, you have difficulty talking. And it's not just a fear, but it almost causes panic. And I don't know how many of you have ever felt panic, but that is what happens to some people at the thought of, I mean, maybe they're sitting at, there's a meeting at work and they get called on. For some people, you might be nervous answering. For others, it causes absolute panic. And then what happens is maybe their face turns red. Or they start shaking and their voice is shaking, and they try to talk and they can't, and then that just feeds into the anxiety. And so for some people, being home has been a relief, because there's a comfort in being home. There's a comfort in working remotely. I've worked with some teens over the last couple of years who actually were thriving doing their remote work on the computer from school, because school was a huge source of anxiety. So being at home, they did much better. And so I think when we think about how these things have impacted the workplace is where some of these mental health issues impact. And are there ways, with ADA or any other accommodations that we can help people manage their anxiety and their depression? Again, we see people with anxiety who have trouble sleeping. I don't know. Okay, this is a little bit of my anxiety. I'll just share here. When I think part of the reason I'm always slow to give my slides, my PowerPoint, when I do a presentation, is because I want it to be perfect. And that perfectionism, I can't get anything done. It's all up here in my head. I'm thinking about it. I'm spinning it. But to put it down and then send it, then there's judgment. Then there's all that stuff. And you're like, oh my God, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? But it was like that for me in high school. It was like that for me in college. Papers were down to the last minute. But part of that was that perfectionism. And we see that in a lot of people. So sometimes when we see our coworkers who put things off, or don't do things, it might not be about them being lazy. It could be that their anxiety is getting in the way. It could be that they're feeling depressed and they just can't get motivated to do things. So these are things that we want to look out for. And instead of judging people, trying to find out if they need some help, if they need some assistance, do they need support? And this doesn't always have to come from our supervisor. It can come from our coworkers helping one another. As Terry said in my introduction, I just believe that we are stronger as a group. And when we can support one another, and we know that people are going to listen to us and not judge us, it's better for all of us. It's just a better way of being. So, I think the other thing that we see a lot of is crying. Like, I'm a crier. I cry at OnStar commercials, on TV. I just cry. And I get people all the time who say, I'm scared to get feedback, or I'm scared to do this because what if I start crying? And, I think there is a judgment when somebody starts crying. It makes some people uncomfortable, but that can be a sign of depression or anxiety. And so how this plays out, I need to talk about this other thing first. So there's that, but then right now is when we're starting to see more of the seasonal affect disorder. It really starts to come, for the most part, we see it starting now. In October, November, there's a reduced level of sunlight, so our circadian rhythm clock gets messed up. The lack of light decreases our internal clock, and so sometimes people start feeling depressed. And I don't know about you all, but it takes me a couple of weeks to adjust to these changes. And there's also a drop in serotonin, which is that neurotransmitter that affects our mood. And when the reduced sunlight can cause a drop in our serotonin levels, and that can bring on some depression. We will see people oversleeping. I don't think it's a quirk that as we get closer to spring, people start talking about dieting because people tend to gain weight over the winter. And that's partly due to some seasonal things, but it can also be that, some people don't like exercising out in the cold or things like that. But there's also a lot of tiredness. Some days it's 6 o'clock and it's dark and I'm thinking, I'm ready for bed. And then I look and it's 6 and I think, well, that's a little too early to be going to bed, but I'm tired. So, one of the things you want to think about is how are you going to keep that energy going? And the other thing that we see then is that in the spring, when spring starts coming, sometimes we'll see people who have seasonal affect in the spring, but oftentimes what we see is an increase in energy and almost a manic-like behavior. That's less common though than this seasonal affect that we see in in the winter. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what happens here with professional development, because, most of us come into work and we want to have a job that we enjoy, or for some people, they want to take on more and more responsibility. They want to move up, things like that. But if you think about depression, if you think about anxiety, one of the things, that I talked about was that there's not a whole lot of motivation. Sometimes it's hard to get going. And that includes in relationships. So if you're feeling depressed and you come in the office, or you're feeling anxious, sometimes people who are anxious, maybe they want to move ahead, but they get really, they're full of anxiety when they think about finding a mentor or talking to their boss about something that they want to do. So they miss out on some of those opportunities that they could have to improve. And the same with depression. Maybe there's a meeting in the evening or sometime, and the person who's depressed really wants to go, thinks, I can make some contacts there, but then the motivation to get up and go, it's not there. So they miss out. So part of the impact of mental health issues on relationships and in the workplace is that we don't always get to have those contacts, to find those mentors, to ask questions. Like maybe a speaker comes in and the person really wants to ask a question, but they can't. Or you're in a staff meeting and someone has a great idea, but they're too nervous, they're too anxious to share that idea. So they don't get to shine. They miss those moments to shine and for people to see who they are and how they're doing. And, I touched on that motivation because, it's maybe, again, you have the person who is not being as productive. They're not getting as much done. And the people who are looking at, advancement or something, they're like, well, they don't always get their work done. They're late a lot. And if it is about depression and anxiety that's not being addressed, it's going to hold you back in a lot of ways. And for some people, that actually adds to this feeling of being a failure or not being good enough. And so it's almost this perpetuates the feeling. And mood, I think we have all seen, we have sometimes those coworkers who just, it's a lot. I mean, Debbie Downer, I think is a term we use a lot. Or the person that's always complaining or always sad. And they tend to be the people that sometimes then aren't invited to lunch or, miss out on maybe the groups going out for drinks after work. And they don't get invited or they don't feel good about going. So because part of how we advance is by those relationships that we develop, and they're not getting the chance to do them as much. And like we said, job productivity, they just don't always have the bandwidth to get not only their work done, but any extra work that might, let people above them know that they have an interest in these things, that they have these great ideas. Because just because someone is depressed or anxious doesn't mean that they don't have these good ideas or dreams or hopes like the rest of us. But they're shut down, they're blunted, and they don't get as expressed as much. And then finally, the impaired work function, that can be anything from missing work, being late to work, to, falling asleep on the job, maybe, not turning in work when you need to. And those are things, that maybe you get written up. And here's where I'm kind of glad, like I said, that the recent events in the last couple of years have led to an increased awareness of mental health, is because I'm hoping that people who are experiencing depression or anxiety or seasonal affect disorder feel like they can come in and say, I need some help. I don't know what's going on. And supervisors a lot of times are nervous about how would I even approach somebody if I thought they were depressed? Because, usually you can't say you need to go to therapy, and I know I talk to a lot of supervisors, and we try to think of ways to convey to someone that there's help available. And sometimes all you can do is offer it, you get 5 free visits once you go to work life, things like that. But I think it is hard for a lot of people to ask for the accommodations that they might need. For instance, people who are depressed, maybe they have a later start date. They might, or not start date, but start time. So maybe everybody else is getting into the office at 8, but they come in at 10 and they stay later. Or maybe, when, when I fill out sometimes FMLA paperwork, sometimes people with depression or anxiety, they can be going along fine, and then something happens and maybe they need to stay home a day. So, that's written into the FMLA paperwork for intervention, what's the word I'm looking for? Occasional, I'll just call it occasional miss or absence. And I think the other part of this then is that sometimes our coworkers are saying, well, why do they get to come in at 10? What's that about? So if someone doesn't feel comfortable saying, I experienced depression and I know you see me coming in at 10, but I'm also working till 7 or 8. Sometimes that's where that communication part comes in. But there's also that stigma. If I talk about my mental health issues, I'm going to be judged. I'm not going to get promotions. People are going to see me as being weak. And that's just not true. I mean, boy, if you all could realize the energy it takes for somebody who is depressed to get out of bed, get dressed, shower, and get to work, you would know that they are not lazy. It's a motivation issue. It's not a personality thing. It's part of the illness. And we have to give people like that room. It's just, to me, it's the same as if someone has cancer and they're getting treatment and they go in for radiation or chemotherapy and they take the day off, or they take the next couple of days off. Sometimes that will happen with depression and anxiety. Sometimes with the depression and anxiety, people end up having to go into the hospital if they're suicidal. And so these are things that we should be prepared for, and I think it's the judgment is the hardest part. One thing I realized in the last few years was my dad died on Halloween a few years ago. And everybody was super supportive, sent me flowers, sent me cards, all of that kind of stuff. It was great. Not that my dad died, but the support I got, obviously. But a few months after that, my nephew, he was 32, and he completed suicide. And I want to tell you nothing. I didn't hear anything, because people don't want to talk about suicide. And that's the reason we lose people sometimes, is because people don't want to recognize that someone they love died by suicide, or that they're feeling suicidal. And I tell you, it's something that people need to talk about. We need to be aware that there are people who are suffering and who might need our help. And simply asking the question of, are you thinking about killing yourself, does not put an idea in their head. It doesn't increase the chances that they will kill themselves. What it does is it gives them an opportunity to express that they need help. That's just that's my soapbox. And I'll step down now. So all that being said, we work at a huge university. We have people in every county of the state, and what's available to help people. So I would direct you all to the Work, Life, and Wellbeing webpage, because there you will find, I tell you, we are pretty fortunate here at UK to have so many offerings to us. There's my program where you get the 5 free visits per fiscal year. They repeat every fiscal year. There are some people, honestly, I have seen every year since I started the program. They use their 5 visits, or they use 3 of them. And I like that, because it's generally they're checking in. They're just doing kind of a mental health check-in. Like we check in with our doctors once a year. That's what they use some of their visits for. For other people, they come in, they use all 5, and they need to be referred for ongoing services. You can go to UK Outpatient. You can, over at Turflin and Family and Community Medicine, they have therapists. There is the referred program where the students in advanced work are offering services. And there's Live Health online services. So we have a lot of options. And like right now, Live Health, our insurance pays for it, and there's no copay right now. Our services, there's no copay, there's no charge, your insurance doesn't know. And I think that's why people like our program too, not only because we're good, but because it doesn't go in charts, it doesn't go in personnel files. And that's appealing to some people, again, because of the stigma of mental health. UK Outpatient, like I said, there can be a wait for a new appointment, but once you're established, it goes a little quicker. So there's that, and I don't know how many of you do the programs. And at Work Life too, I would invite you all on Mondays, every Monday at noon. My coworker Rhonda and I do what we call the midday mingle. And it's from noon to 1, and we get together, and just like Seinfeld, we talk about nothing. There's no agenda. There's no requirements for membership. You just show up, and we might talk about snakes in Florida. We might talk about the best recipe for brownies. We might talk about paper doll clothes. It doesn't matter. We don't know where we're going to go, but it's a great group, and there's a core group, and we would love to have more people join. It's a great thing. So we do different things like that. My coworker Eric offers with Jackie in Health and Wellness a mindfulness self-compassion group, and that's like a 4-week series, and he offers that occasionally. So we do some special programming too that you can get if you contact Azetta Beatty. She will that's my supervisor. She will put you on our list of people that are interested in wellness issues, and occasionally you'll get emails about opportunities that are offered. And then there is wellness. And what do they have? And they might have changed the names, but there's Be Well, there's Eat Well, there's Move Well, and there's some other well. But they have programs for people who want to have better nutrition. They have people, you can go, and if you want to start exercising and you have no idea what to do, they'll put together an exercise program for you for free. And you make an appointment, and not only will they develop the program, but they'll meet you and show you how to do it. They'll take you through it. And that's free. And exercise is, all the research says, one of the best ways to manage mental health issues, especially anxiety. So that's there. They have, affordable membership to over at Export Street and over at Seton Center. It used to be $7 a month. I mean, you can't beat that, or $20 if you want to use the students plus the employees thing. And let's see.
And just not to interrupt you too much at
yeah.
the moment, but we have several people who are interested in finding out more about your midday mingle. Do you have a link for that we can give them? I just sent them one, but it's an older. It's from April 2017.
It's the same link all the time, and we don't want to publicize it because we did, and we had people that were not very nice come into our room. So if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email and I will send that link to you. And Although I think there is a sign up on our page for Zoom. And if you sign up, you only have to sign up once, and then it will give you the link. And then it's the same link all the time. Are you checking, Terry? I can see you over there.
I am.
Do it. Come on, Terry.
I'm going to put your email in there for them in case they have some follow-up stuff. But
yeah.
I'll do a little more checking while we're going through this.
Okay. But remind me at the end, because if not, I will try to switch screens again and give that to you. But you can also type in Midday Mingle in the UK search box, and it should take you to the sign up. And after you sign up once, you can just come as you want after that. You don't have to sign up every time.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to have y'all. It's a fun group. And this is what I love about Midday Mingle is that Rhonda and I both believe in bringing people together. I mean, I love when people come together. And this was a group of people that did not know each other at all when they came together. And over the course of the pandemic, because we were doing it 2 days a week, we have seen people get married. We have had people whose husband died, parents died. We have seen people with illness, work troubles, and they are all friends now. These are people now who talk to each other. We get together for lunch like once a quarter. Well, we've done it once. I mean, once we could. So I really encourage you all to do that. And one of my favorite parts of wellness is the Be Well program. Amy Rodquist-Codet and Jackie Carroll, two of the best health coaches around. Amy, I mean, they're both jewels. And I always joke with Jackie that she farts rainbows because she's just happy all the time. And it's not a fake happiness. She's happy because she believes in what she's doing. And the same with Amy. But they have tiny habits. How do you start a habit? They have some courses that, maybe last 8 weeks, 9 weeks. And that's what I think work life and well-being are really good at, is offering these classes where you can kind of come in and see, is this something I'm interested in? Is this something that might help me? And then if you want to do more, you can. Jackie and Amy both offer one-on-one meetings. If you are struggling and don't know what to do, it's not therapy, but it is some life coaching. So there's that. Let's see. There's also Terry Weber is our elder care specialist. One thing that we see that causes a lot of stress and anxiety and even depression is caregivers caring for elders. And we are seeing more people who are caring for their elders and for their kids. We call that the sandwich people, because caregiving is very difficult. And no matter where your elder lives in the United States, if you need a resource, Terry Weber will find that resource for you. She's like a dog with a bone. She will not stop till she finds you some resource. And so what that service does is it reduces the number of phone calls you have to make to find the services. And she gives you a list of services that then you can call. And so it saves a bunch of time. And there's also the caregiver support group that meets the third Wednesday of every month. And that's on our elder care website, as well as there's an elder care newsletter that comes out once a month. Retirement, working parents group. Azetta does a lot of that. There's a group, they get together and they walk. There's different presentations during their lunches, maybe about parenting kids, whether it's teens, babies, whatever. And there's a whole lot of resources on the working parents section of the work life on this page that I have up here. So there's just, UK has a variety of services that I hope you all will take advantage of, because I want to say almost all of them are free, and we want you to use them. We want you to find the support you need. And, oftentimes if you can't find support here, we'll try and find you something in the community. So it's a quick rundown. That was a lot of information. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now, or not. We could just sit here and do some mindfulness, just quiet time, which makes me nervous, but other people seem to like it. You're muted, Terry.
I was just telling my colleagues that I was getting ready to start a question and answer session. Well, one, thank you very much for all of that information. As you said, it was just chock full of all kinds of things. So I want to make sure that we give people time to ask their questions, and also to tell you that if you haven't been looking at it, the chat has links to several of the topics that Ann was talking about, to websites and her email address, and several people have put links to the midday mingle. So if you'll just go to the chat, you'll be able to click them there.
And Pamela, thank you for integrative medicine. I didn't mention that, but that's a great service. Great service.
So
Cassandra, sorry.
I see somebody's, I thought it was a raised hand, but it wasn't. But I have a couple of questions for you while we're waiting for other people to ask a question or to unmute themselves. So one of the things that I think would probably be great for everybody to have is kind of a what to say and what not to say to someone that you think is suffering either from depression, anxiety, seasonal affective disorder. I mean, we see these things about, what to not to say at funerals, because people will say the most outrageous things there. But how do we address that in a workplace, whether that's either online? I mean, that's another question I have, is what could we be looking for when we're on these Zoom calls to know something's off there. But anyway, what's a to say or what not to say when you suspect that somebody is going through a tough time?
The best thing to say, even if you don't know what to say, is just to say, I've noticed a change in XYZ. I noticed that you seem really tired, or it seems like that something's going on. And if I can help, please let me know. Or if you need someone to talk to, I would love to listen. I'll help you. But your job is not to cure them. Your job is not to offer them therapy. It's just to listen, because sometimes people don't have anybody that will really listen to them. When I used to get called out to jails and hospitals to do suicide assessments, I cannot tell you how many times somebody said to me, "You are the first person that has listened to me in this many years." And listening just simply can be as easy as saying, "Oh, I'm really sorry. That sounds hard." That you don't have to solve it. If they say, "Yeah, I'm really struggling," you can say, "There's a lot of resources. Maybe would you like me to help you find some?" And then you can go to our page. You can call me or my colleagues, and we're happy to set you up. And I think for supervisors, you can say, you can use some concrete things. I noticed that you've missed 4 days when you never used to miss. And if something's going on, I'd like to offer you some resources. So it's
Okay.
just being honest with them about, I'm concerned about you.
Okay, thank you for that. And one of the things that I have noticed in my own work, because I worked from home for 16 months and thought I would hate it, ended up actually liking it a great deal. And then, then we come back. And so, I remember the first day that I worked from home and I thought, I can't believe I'm having to work from home and this is not going to be a good thing. And then you get used to it. And now now I'm back, but I'm back for 4 days a week and I work from home for one, which I appreciate that hybrid nature, but it's still change for people. It's still change for people have to get used to a new normal. And at least I have one day where I can feel like I was back 16 months ago. So I'm just wondering what effect you think change, just actual change, has on people and how much that affects their mood.
Yeah, I mean, how many people do you know who say, "Oh, I love change"? Very few. Most of us just are thinking, "Oh, change." And change is really hard when we feel like we have no say in that change, when we have no control over that change. And the people who have been struggling the most are people who were told, maybe just out of ignorance, or so many things changed throughout this pandemic, that we were continuously adjusting. But maybe they were told, well, when this is over, you can still work from home. But then it turned out that no, maybe the higher ups wanted them in the office more. So the change part is there a way? And I think for some people, the hybrid model is helpful. I think that it, again, I just wish we'd talk about things, that maybe you bring your group together, and everybody has an opportunity to talk about what did they like about working at home? What is the difference between what did they get while working at home that they can't get while they're at work in the office? Because like I said, some people found that they really enjoyed working from home, whether it was more time with family, less time commuting, less time trying to find parking. But there's also a level of acceptance that at some point, if your boss says, no, you're coming back, that you have to accept you're coming back. And that's where you might need to talk to somebody. You might need to figure out, okay, while I was home, I really liked that I could, go visit my mom after work. So maybe you talk to your boss and you say, could I work 2 9-days instead of 5 9-days or something like that, so that you can still work that in. So that's where maybe you look at flexible work arrangements. So the key here is that if you have a question about change or you're uncomfortable with it, hopefully you have somebody that you can talk to. And if there is a way to accommodate or find a solution, that you can. But if not, the other part then is, you can accept it, you can fight it, you can leave. You have different choices, and I say that knowing that for some people, having different choices also means sometimes that you don't. I mean, if you're the only one working in the house, you're not just going to say, well, I'm leaving because I don't like this change, So yeah, it's a process. And oftentimes, at first, I think if you've worked at UK long enough, that you might change now, but in 2 years, you might be changing back.
Thank you. I had an earlier question about the QPR training. Can you tell me, can departments or divisions schedule those, or is it, I found a link that's only for a training that happened back in October. So I don't know if I'll share that link because at least it asks them the question, but I don't know if there's a main page that we could go to talk about that.
I love presenting this program. I can present it to groups. I can present it to departments. The one in October, I did one in September. That was Suicide Awareness Month. I did another in October because we had so many people sign up in September that I couldn't get them all. So we did another one in October. And that was for any UK employee or their partner or sponsor dependent. But yeah, if you have a department that is interested in learning about that, or a group of people, yeah, contact me. I'm happy to do it. It's an hour to hour and a half presentation. It's interactive and you get a lot of good information.
And I will say that I have taken that entire training back several years ago, and I found it very valuable for all kinds of reasons, actually.
Yes.
Just as you were saying, when you ask the question, you're acknowledging something, and sometimes the acknowledgement is all people need in order to move forward with finding solutions for themselves. And we'll give a few seconds for anybody else to ask a question. I think the growing thought is that 7 seconds is what you need to get through awkward silence. And
well, I sure appreciate being able to talk to you all about this information. Mental health, we all have it within us to help one another and help ourselves. And I hope that you know that there's help if you ask for it.
I did get one late breaking one, and that was, hold on, everybody's saying good. Thank you. So now I've got to find this one again. Any tips on how to limit interaction with others but not appear negative? In other words, just because somebody doesn't want to be bubbly and perky all the time doesn't necessarily mean that they're necessarily going through some sort of a depression or anxiety or something like that.
Yeah, I think, again, it's kind of a straight up thing of saying, I would love to join you. But today, I brought my lunch and I feel like kind of listening to some music or I feel like doing my work, but don't stop inviting me. I'm just kind of in a quiet mood. I'm okay. But I think today I'm just going to stay in my office or close my office door, but I'm okay. Just acknowledge that you appreciate that, but that you have other plans.
I do like the phrase, would you ask me again? Because I've had to do that a couple of times. Like, I really wish I could go, but I can't. But would you please ask me again? And that acknowledges them and then leaves it open for other people. All right. Anything else?
And if you think of something later, feel free to email me and ask. I'll be happy to respond.
Well, thank all of you again for being with us today. Again, we'll be back here December the 17th for another session. And that information goes out on a listserv. So if you're not getting that information directly into your mailbox, or you got this one today because someone forwarded it to you and you didn't get it, I will put my email address in the chat here in just a second, and you're welcome to send me an email and I will see about getting that taken care of. Right?
So I do see, Jamie, yes, dependents can use the 5 free visits, but it's a total of 5 visits per family. So not each member gets 5, but if you have a child maybe that needs some services, we have seen kids as young as 4, and we see retirees as well. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you again, and thanks to our community for showing up and supporting this presentation today. Have a great day.
Thank you.